I asked you guys on Instagram if you wanted me to talk about my music production live streaming setup that I also use for my production clients, and everybody said yes. So I'm just going to go through the process top down and try to explain why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. And I'll also walk through this diagram of exactly how the setup works. But I think an important question to answer is, who is this for and why would you need a setup like this? One where you can work in a DAW like Ableton or Logic or whatever and stream that video and audio. Well, the most basic answer is content creation. Things like Twitch or YouTube. I feel like the streaming world is like awesome for music producers because we're used to being alone and not being able to like hang out with people while we do what we do. And streaming is a great way to sort of open up the door on your process, build a connection with people. I do it occasionally on Twitch, link in the description. Another thing that's helpful for is content creation. So recording videos like this. I am currently recording through this setup right now, and if I want to, I can swap over to my DAW and just start making something from scratch. And personally, I found what I've made to be the most seamless version of it. You can use the Senpai vertical cam as a way to use this setup to stream to Instagram, record vertical content. And then I think the third use for it, which is honestly what I think is the most practical for a lot of people, is music freelancers who work online. I work as a freelance music producer, also a link in the description. And a majority of the clients I work with do not live locally. We are almost always on Zoom from different parts of the US. In the course of a week, it's not uncommon for me to be working with somebody from Singapore, LA, Canada, Ohio, and Finland. Again, with this system, not only can we jump on a Zoom session and talk about things that we want to change, but I can actually open up my session and they can hear my voice and my DAW audio through this setup at the same time in a way where during the revision process, we can literally just be like, change that. Okay, we're done. And in an hour, we've circumvented 2 weeks worth of emails. This is also for people who do live session tracking. If you are somebody who does maybe remote guitar recording or remote drum work, this is a way for your client to jump on a Zoom call with you and kind of give you specific directions in the moment for what they're looking for, and avoid the scenario where you spend an hour making something for them only to realize you read their description like partially wrong and you have to redo it. So yeah, I personally see a lot of use cases for this streaming setup. Now, before we can talk about streaming music production, I think it's also important to talk about the problems that music production specifically is going to have with streaming. And the number one issue is latency. All right, if you are trying to run something like OBS while running a DAW session, it's just going to eat up your CPU to the point where if you're running it at a really fast buffer, you're just going to get nonstop popping and clicking, even if you're using a really high-end computer. A common way to get around this problem is to just permanently have every session that you're working in at the max buffer size it can be. Watch somebody like Bishu record audio into his DAW and then see him grab every audio clip and move it over by hand. And while that might work for him when he's like top-lining vocals, for me, I'm recording guitar. And even just trying to monitor stuff with that much latency, it makes it terrible. It makes it not fun. It actually inhibits you from doing it correctly. There was a brief moment in time where I avoided making like beat videos on my YouTube channel because at the time I was recording those videos via OBS on the computer that I was producing on, and it would just always cause problems for me. I would look at the OBS recording and there would always be like these pops or glitches where like audio would just cut out because the CPU usage was just too high at certain points, or I would have to produce specific kinds of styles where I didn't have to use that many plugins. And now I feel like I have a lot of fun with it because I don't really have any of those limitations. I can basically interact with the session the way that I normally do, and I don't have to worry about keeping my latency low. I don't need to worry about if I want to record acoustic guitar, I can just record acoustic guitar and I don't have to think, acoustic guitar is pretty timing important, and I've got like a 50 millisecond delay, and it's not going to sound good. So it just allows for more freedom and stuff like that. I think another problem people run into when they're trying to make a streaming setup for music production is, where does your microphone go? Like if you plug it into your DAW so that you can record your microphone into your DAW, then it's not going to be going into your streaming PC. But then if you do the opposite, then you have a really nice microphone that you then can't use in your DAW. And for me, when I'm making music, I love having a microphone that's just ready to go all the time. And I really didn't feel like making a whole different setup where I have two microphones going at the same time, and one of them is the recording one and one is the streaming one. Like I didn't have any interest in that, so I tried to find a different solution, and I believe I found one. But one thing that I do want to add as a disclaimer, streaming is one of those things where it's just expensive up front. There isn't really an accessible way to do it unless you're just using your phone. And so So one of the trepidations I have with this video is I don't want everybody to just watch this video and feel like they need to buy like $2,000 worth of equipment. Like, I would highly encourage you to see if there is a way for you to try some equivalent streaming setup without breaking the bank. Maybe that means finding a cheaper second computer or using one that you already have and then streaming at a lower resolution. Maybe trying to not stream and record at the same time. I just want to put this as a disclaimer because I feel like the music production world is so used to like, oh, there's a free app that you can use to try it out. There's a free this thing you can use to try it out. Streaming is prohibitively not that. It is like you got to spend a boatload of cash to get into it. So for me, I took all of these pieces and I put them in an Amazon shopping list and I like waited on it for like, I want to say 3 months because I really wanted to make sure that this was something that I wanted to do. And I would say that it has enriched my business as a whole and it's more than paid for itself already. But that's because I am a professional working in this field as a freelancer. And so every single project I do benefits from this setup. And if you're somebody who is just kind of casually getting into this, you may not necessarily see that kind of benefit up front. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying be aware of this is my reason for having it. I really don't want to be like the OBS questions guy, but if you have like sort of larger broad stroke questions about streaming or OBS, I would highly recommend check out Epos Vox and Senpai Gaming on YouTube. Just watch those channels because I feel like those are great resources for just learning that software or any other facet of streaming. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. So I just made a real quick diagram of my setup in the new Freeform app, and I figured I would just start walking through the individual pieces of it, explain what they do, explain why I decided to do it that way. I'll try to include links in the description for things that I feel are really relevant. There are a couple of things like the computer that I don't really feel like it's worthwhile for me to list the specific one that I got because I basically just got like a gaming laptop that could handle it. The biggest thing you'll see is, like I said, 2 computers. We have this audio computer here and then a laptop over here on the side. For my audio computer, I'm actually using a custom PC that my friend Galen helped me build. I'm not going to go through giving the specific specs for it just because it was what we could build with the budget that I had like 3 years ago. And so I don't feel like giving an exact parts breakdown would be helpful. But yeah, just insert here any music production PC that you're currently using. And then for the streaming PC, I am using my MSI gaming laptop that I actually bought specifically for video editing for content creation. I have yet to find a solution for music production streaming that does not involve having a second computer for the reasons that I've already stated. So if you're going to try to ask me how do I get a setup like what you're describing without having to buy a second computer, then I can't help you. I will say when you are doing a 2 PC streaming setup or a 2 Mac streaming setup, you actually don't need as beefy of a computer as you might think that you need. Like a gaming laptop from 2 years ago will probably do you just fine. I would recommend getting something that has a decent graphics card in it, just because when you're running programs like OBS for streaming, having a good graphics card is really helpful. Another reason why I like having a laptop is because if you want to go without buying like the fancy DSLR that I already have, you can just use the built-in webcam on your laptop, and that will work honestly just fine for a lot of needs. When I'm in a pinch for client calls, sometimes I will still use that one. And then as you can see, both of these computers have their own audio interfaces. For my audio interface, that's just my regular daily driver audio interface. I'm using an Antelope Discrete 4, which has really nice clean preamps, and I really enjoy it. And one of the things that's really helpful about this interface, specifically for this kind of setup, is there are multiple headphone outs. There are 4, which I will walk through later why that's important. And then I just kind of went cheapo for the streaming interface. It's just a Euphoria Behringer interface. It's not amazing. If there's any part of this setup that I would probably not recommend, it would be that. It works fine for me. It's really hard to recommend buying that interface because it's literally just like the most bottom of the barrel like audio interface. It's technically working, but the second I were to grow beyond what I'm doing right this second, I might have to upgrade that. So I would probably recommend getting something even like a Focusrite Scarlett. I feel like even that would have like a little bit of a better result. But yeah, now the biggest part of this setup is my SM7B, which you can see right here, and that is going to this splitter here, which is probably one of the things where I'm gonna recommend getting the exact one that I got. It is the ART or ART Pro Split. It is a transformer isolated splitter, and the reason why that's important is for my SM7B, I actually have a mic booster, and one of the problems that you get with splitting a mic normally across 2 different signals is you need to be able to run phantom power to the mic. And the reason why I like this ART Pro Split so much is because it's transformer isolated, I can actually run phantom power from my Antelope into my mic booster, which is just a Clark Technic CM1. It's like a cloud lifter, but it's made by Clark Technic. And then that can go and power my mic, and I don't have to worry about short circuiting anything or overloading the microphone when it runs to my other interface. So yeah, that splitter is really helpful. And so now that the SM7B is powered via the Antelope, and it's also receiving audio from the mic via that input, the other output of the splitter goes to the streaming audio interface. And honestly, one of the reasons why I would probably recommend not getting the Behringer interface is because I'm getting the mic booster for this interface, but not for the other one. Like if I wanted to get cleaner audio for my streaming setup, I would probably get another Clark Technic and then just use phantom power on the Behringer, but I do not think that the phantom power on the Behringer sounds good at all. So if you're okay with not running phantom power to a mic booster or whatever, then you can just cut this guy out here. I really like using it because when I'm recording audio in a DAW, it really just makes the SM7B more usable for me. But I honestly feel like it doesn't make that much of a difference for the streaming audio. But yeah, my audio interface controls my headphones or my speakers, depending on which one I'm using. I have a really nice DSLR as my camera. It's just like an old Sony APS-C camera. I believe it's the A6300. It's like one of the discontinued versions of it. I honestly think it's still great. You just need to find something that looks decent that you can just kind of set and forget. If I had to invest in anything, I would invest in a nice lens over a nice camera, just because, you know, if you buy a cheap lens, you'll have to like replace it almost immediately. But if you can get like some really nice glass and you sort of stick with one camera system, you can like put that lens on any camera that you get in the future. And then that DSLR is going into a Camlink from Elgato, which is the Camlink 4K. I've been running into some issues recently running 4K, so I'm just doing 1080p right now. People will talk about running 4K all the time, but what they don't realize is that also puts like an extra strain on like a streaming setup. So a setup that is very stable, has like very low CPU usage. If you take that same stream and you just up it to 4K, it could very easily start dropping frames and be very unstable. So music production is already something that there's a lacking of on Twitch and YouTube already. So if you're streaming it, you're already like ahead of the game. Don't feel like you need to have like 60 FPS, 4K streams in order to stand out. Like that's for the people who are doing just chatting. If you're doing music production, you can totally do 1080p, 24 frames a second, and it'll look fine. And then to make it so my streaming computer can see what my DAW is doing, the HDMI cable that's running out of my computer, instead of going straight to my monitor, it goes to an Elgato capture card. I'll link the one that I got. Honestly, I think that most of them are just fine. You just want to make sure you're not doing something that is like making your monitor look weird or like lowering the refresh rate of your monitor. And then I use the HDMI out to go to the monitor, the USB connection to go to the streaming laptop. And then the way I get my DAW audio into my streaming laptop is the Elgato actually has like an aux input on it. So what I've done is I've taken a spare headphone output from my Antelope and gone into the Elgato capture card. And then when I'm in OBS, I can just use that capture card as an audio source and it will just be picking up my DAW audio. You will see this like little red block in between these two. I think it is worthwhile to get a noise isolator. They're really cheap. I think they're like $10 on Amazon, but yeah, it just kind of guarantees that you're not going to get any cross contamination between your DAW setup on your computer and your audio input on your stream. You may not need it, but sometimes you can get a bit of a nasty noise because you're connecting two computers that have their own power supply going, and it's normally not an issue, but sometimes you will get like a nasty buzzing sound that's just impossible to remove. And so having a noise isolator is really helpful for that. But yeah, that's what the setup looks like. Again, if you have any general broad stroke questions, put them down in the comments. I'd love to answer them. But yeah, I will see you guys next week.